organism. Pumps, electronics, garbage disposal, and with all the microbes, politics, everything is contained in essence in the human form itself. And all the inventions is projected through the consciousness into other levels of substance and form, which we call the world, which is also contained in consciousness. So, as the consciousness is restored, so are the mechanisms, the true mechanisms, through which creativity is conducted. Fallen human consciousness has produced the misery. There's a very limited range of power available. But as there is reconnection through the tone with cosmic mind, for one thing, substance begins to be generated, finer substance, which is, you might say, the initial recreative requirement. You can't build anything without something. If God, if cosmic mind is going to create a world, it has to have something to work with, and substance, vibrational substance, is required. And there's plenty of coarse stuff around, but what has been absent is the finer substance, which is generated through human beings, primarily through their consciousness, as we'll see in a minute. This finer substance allows there to appear in form within the human consciousness levels of machinery which have heretofore been absent because of the potency of these instruments and the nature of them. It would have been very destructive if the fallen human consciousness had had access to processes and instrumentation in the fallen state. It's a foolproof system, this recreative process. First of all, finer substance has to be generated, and the first thing that happens in that finer substance, new instruments, new mechanisms begin to reappear. They're already there in spirit, but it needs a particular quality of substance to appear, reappear. It's not by chance, I suspect, that these new conductors, superconductors, are appearing in the human world now. These are substances which convey power, electricity, long distances with no lowering of the power because there's no resistance. Now, that corollary in the body of mankind is the generation of finer substance through which spirit can begin to be released, because, for one thing, there's no resistance. In the finer substance, there's no resistance. And then what needs to be achieved will be achieved. They're already pointing to trains traveling from New York to LA in 2 hours, utilizing this new technology, for example, which is quite impressive to the human mind. Now, from the divine standpoint, that is undoubtedly nothing when one considers the divine technology already manifest on this globe. The divine technology is here. How all that may be coordinated and utilized to implement the divine purposes requires a certain connecting substance for which we are responsible and are generating it, presumably. So, the generation of fine substance is, as Martin has emphasized over and over again, the crucial thing. This begins to allow a more, not just theoretical, but factual connection with cosmic mind and cosmic machinery. Human beings are trying to solve their problems the way they're trying to solve them at the intellectual level. Thinking up new inventions, perhaps, to circumvent disaster, relieve pressures of various kinds. Now we are awakening, because of whatever fine substance we've generated, to realize that that is not the way to do it. That's still sweat of the brow. Man was cast out of the garden and then had to achieve everything by sweat of the brow. Great effort. When we are an integral part of cosmic mind, we don't have to try to do anything. All we have to do is to move with what cosmic mind is already doing. And that's a different kind of life altogether. The question may arise in our own private worlds. Are we trying to solve what we conceive to be problems in our worlds? Lack of relationships, lack of money, lack of job, lack of something, or too much of something else that we don't like. We probably, if we have such recurring problems, despite receiving mailings every 2 weeks, we have actually been still trying to solve our problems the way mankind has been trying to solve its problems, through cleverer and cleverer manipulation. We have to connect up our own worlds and specific situations into cosmic mind for our own worlds before we can emerge consciously as part of the rudder for mankind. So we may have been thinking how to solve a certain problem. For example, how can I solve this problem? For years I've been trying to solve this problem. And usually what people think of as thinking isn't thinking, it's worrying. Not really thinking at all. Just worrying and going over the same ruts. Well, we have to let something totally different happen. Let cosmic mind come into the situation and do what it would do. Of course, we ourselves have to have reached, with the finer substance being generated, an interesting thing begins to happen in our experience of life. Because we generate finer substance, we begin to connect up with spirit, we say, universal spirit, cosmic mind, and the worry begins to drain away. That's one happy blessing which accrues to the individual. Not that we finally solved all the problems, now we're happy, but because we're letting the whole do its thing, including in and through us, worry begins to dissolve, but also what we used to crave at least loses its glitter a little bit. We may be deluded to think it's old age. I'm getting older, so I'm getting disillusioned. Well, that's all right. However it happens is wonderful. It probably isn't old age. it probably is the generation of finer and finer substance which begins to let spirit have more molding capability of the substance which gives consciousness. And therefore the true shape of consciousness begins to reappear, and inherent in the experience of that divinely shaped consciousness is heaven. That is the experience of it. So this happens, and we can begin to relax. We do begin to relax, letting the creative process, cosmic mind, the Lord, have its way. And so we no longer struggle to fulfill specific ideas about how circumstances should work out in our lives. We've heard this before. But at certain junctures, it begins to sound different because there's more substance, and it means something different then. But basically, if one hasn't got a job, for example, or one feels one's in the wrong job, or if one's having difficulty with one's relationships, one's so lonely perhaps one's lonely, the human nature idea is to rush off and join clubs, go to meetings perhaps, be with people. That is not the way to go about it. The way to go about it is to generate finer substance. That's it. So that one can sit in one's armchair and do far more about solving one's problems than rushing out trying to meet anybody, even other emissaries. It's the generation of fine substance. It's the way one does any little thing, ties one's shoes, answers the telephone. All those seemingly private processes are not private, they're part of the cosmic mind in operation. And the quality of participation is generating finer substance which plugs one into the whole and allows the current to enter into one's world, moving whatever needs to be moved at the lower dimensional levels to where they need to be moved. Consciousness is a thrilling arena of creative activity. How much sweat does it take to change, for example, a destructive feeling about someone or some situation? Well, it doesn't necessarily take perspiration. I suppose it could. But there's a certain current and work vibrationally, we say, to, first of all, become aware of destructive thoughts and destructive feelings. Here are two key components to the mechanism of consciousness: thought, feeling. Let's work with those a little bit. It is the working with these two components in consciousness, thoughts and feelings, which are key to generating quality of substance. We know that destructive feelings and destructive thoughts dissipate finer substance. So, it is far more significant to sorting out any pressure pattern in your life, your world, to, first of all, become aware of destructive feelings and thoughts. Do you know, I think it was relatively recently, when I became consciously aware of how much destructive feeling moved through my consciousness, and I was unconscious of it. You see someone or think of someone, and you think about them for a while, And if you reflect back, a lot of it was destructive. At the time, you didn't think, well, this is destructive thoughts about this person or feelings. You just thought about them. The swine. The egotist. And you spent a good 20 minutes thinking about them and having reactions, all these arguments within yourself. I'm going to say this to him, and if he says that to me, Now, most people go through a day having a lot of that sort of process going on, and they're unconscious of it, actually. At one level, they're conscious because they're thinking it. But you might say there's not enough fine substance for the focus of identity to be aware of what's going on. But as we generate finer substance, there begins to be substance in which the focus of identity can begin to appear, and the focus of consciousness, which is higher than the other levels of substance in consciousness in this form, and you can begin to see processes going on in levels of the mind, in levels of the consciousness, which are below this part of the consciousness, which is where the focus of identity is. So you can look and you can see destructive processes going on. And one can begin to do something about that in one's own consciousness, one's own human consciousness. And that is very important because you're beginning to retune the mechanism of consciousness by getting that knock out of thoughts and feelings. And the polluted exhaust going on in there. So we fine-tune thoughts and feelings, making sure they're in alignment with the tone, within the one spirit, the one attitude of cosmic mind. So it is far more important, as I'm saying, to actually start to work with the tone of thoughts and feelings than to do anything out there. Action is not really significant in what we're describing now. The solution of your problems, if I can put it that way, which ultimately comes to man's problem, so it's not just a personal thing, but the solution to any problem, any difficult situation in one's world is not in any way to be started by action, any action whatsoever. The beginning is in consciousness with this realignment, reattunement of thoughts and feelings. That will allow all sorts of changes to go on in the mechanism of consciousness, most of which are as yet unconscious still. There are mechanisms which are present in consciousness, in the subconscious of man. There are mechanisms there which we need not become aware of, actually. Some we need to become aware of, like, first of all, realignment of thought and feeling. Then there are mechanisms which begin to appear in this finer substance, which we don't really need to have any conscious awareness of, but they begin to work. For example, let me give an example. In man's world, money is a substance which human consciousness uses to govern the world of form. It is through the substance of money that other objects can be moved around. And we have to use money too, that's true. But this finer substance that we've been considering is the divine substance through which spirit governs the world of form. And, you see, the beauty is human beings have to expend energy. They have to expend their life force to accumulate money. Because they know this substance is very important. You can't do very much, human beings say, without this substance in the building process. Whatever they're going to do, build, you've got to have this substance to work through. Angelically speaking, there's truth to that, inasmuch as there are certain substances which one needs in order to create, to move the lower levels of form and substance around. And this fine substance, pneumoplasm, we call it, is the substance. This is the medium of action, the medium of exchange, one might say. And we can generate that sat in our armchair, as I was saying, or answering the telephone. And as we generate this substance, the finer substance permeates all the lower qualities of vibratory substance and the forms that are composed of that substance, and therefore spirit can draw to it what it needs in the form of people, in the form of money, jobs, anything can easily be drawn to the angel, the focus of spirit, of cosmic mind. Anything that focus requires can easily be drawn to him or her if this medium of communication in cosmic mind is available. If it isn't available, then there's no conductivity of communication, for one thing. And the resonant substance can't be drawn. This is expanding the view of resonant substance for a moment to include any substance which is resonant with the purposes of this angel. And that is a mechanism which begins to appear in the human psyche, whereby everything I need is drawn to me, with or without money, but probably with a bit of money, too, if needed. That'll come. Because that's a lower form of substance. That's not really the governing substance. The friends we need, the associations we need, the intimate relationships we need, they are all inexorably drawn because they are a part of the whole as well, and being moved by the creative process anyway. But the machinery of connection is enhanced enormously as the finest substance is available. So, what an exciting place the human consciousness becomes when it is in heaven and has the quality of substance which exists in heaven, in which the machinery of creation begins to reappear, be given form in this fine substance, and the pure spirit of one's being may move through that machinery, primarily of consciousness, thoughts and feelings, which is connected to the larger machinery, which is cosmic mind and cosmic process, the creative process. This is what we are awakening, our consciousnesses are awakening into, and it's delightful. No longer actually is there self-centered concern, because those self-centered concerns were glimpses in the dark of shapes and forms all around us that filled us with fear, anxiety, frustration, whatever. But with the generation of finer substance, Lucifer, the consciousness of man, is restored, the light bearer is restored, and what begins to be seen in the light, in the consciousness then, is heaven. And many things that have been lying around in our world, people too, begin to be seen as delightful elements to be worked with. And many things we thought which were so wonderful, like a rock under which to hide in the dark, the light comes on and we see it's a rock and is not nearly so interesting as this person or this pattern of activity which emerges. So how thankful we may be that Yolanda and Martin and many others, no doubt, in their lesser expressions of the tone, have brought the tone, which seems so nebulous and inconsequential to the human mind. But the tone is the crucial thing, which allows the reconnection to be made in cosmic mind so that we can play our part moment by moment in that. And heaven is recreated all around us. And that's what we're doing. Praise God.